What's up guys, Thomas from FT Speed, and today we're doing our first modifications on the new Supra by installing Eibach's new lowering springs. Now I say these are new Eibach springs, and I mean that they're not yet released, and they're technically prototypes, and we've got the first pair along with their new shortened bump stops, so we'll see how these things do. So once you have your wheels off and the car's jacked up, the first thing we're going to remove is going to be the sway bar end link, the one that is connected to the strut. We're going to be using a 16mm socket on our impact. We're using an impact because this thing will just constantly spin if you just put a wrench on it. Then there's a bunch of wires, electrical connectors, and like brake lines that you're gonna need to remove because we're gonna move this eventually out. We don't want any of these wires to snag. So go ahead and disconnect any wires you see so they don't get snagged. Next, we'll need to pop the hood because we need to get access to the top of the strut mount. There's a couple different plastic pieces that we're gonna have to remove, but those are very easy to remove. This is going to be the first one to remove. It's just a simple twist of this, and that comes right out. And then there's two pop clips here. You really have to like pry this out. I've already got these loosened, so it's easier to show. But once you've got that out, you can pull, and then we're going to have access to this bolt so we can remove the shock from the strut. Now we can place a jack underneath the bottom of the strut. Make sure it's not gonna drop free because next we're taking an 18mm socket right here and we're gonna impact this. Now, because we're gonna be uncompressing the spring, I am gonna be putting spring compressors on there just to make sure. It's probably not compressed too much, but just to be safe since Supra's a nice car. I don't want to ruin it or potentially me. So we're gonna throw these on and then we're gonna slowly lower the jack. After we do that, swing this whole thing out, swap the springs, and go from there. All right, now that that spring won't pop out and hit us in the face, we can lower this down slowly. Make sure we don't snag anything like this brake line. And then there's just enough room to slide this thing out. And good thing these fender liners are plastic. They can flex a little bit. Nothing's holding it up. That's good. We can just slide this old spring out, and then the dust boot and bump stop are in here. We actually have new bump stops, which is kind of a new thing for lowering springs for the Supra right now. Eibach is, I think, the only one doing them right now. So we have shorter ones, so we're not gonna slam into them, give them a little bit more range of motion. So let's go ahead and throw the new springs on. So this is the old dust boot, and this is our old bump stop. If we take this out, there we go. And compare it to the new one, the new Eibach one, there's a huge difference in height there. So we're gonna throw the new one in, and we're gonna be reusing the old dust boot. So the new bump stop can be slid on like that. It's gonna hang out up top here. And then we're reusing the old dust boot, and this is the top of the spring perch. There are some lines up here where you want to match the end of the spring. So make sure you just put that back where it's supposed to go. And then we can move this guy back where it belongs. So getting this back in, one with just yourself, one person, if you don't have any friends to help out, we need to align the damper right back in the hole to bolt it to the top head, since we didn't do it the normal way where we take the whole top hat out. So the way I'm gonna do it is jack this up with my foot because we need to be over top looking down to make sure we're aligned with the hole. So be very careful. You don't wanna break anything. Yeah, okay. Slowly jack this up. Don't laugh at me. It probably looks really dumb. Now before we impact this nut on the top back on, you'll want to loosen the jacks, put a little bit of pressure on here so you can tighten it down, and then make sure that the spring perches are in fact at the end of the spring, because you want to make sure those are aligned, otherwise it'll be off and that's probably not safe to drive. So double check those first. Okay, so the spring is now installed. Everything looks good to go. Now we just need to put the tie rod back on and then reconnect all the wires and the brake lines that we already disconnected. Now the rears are going to be pretty simple as well. There's a couple extra steps. There's a few more bolts to undo. But the first step is to remove the little aero shielding piece that's underneath the lower control arm. So these are the aero guards I was talking about, and you'll need a 10 mil, probably a deep well with an extension to get up in there to get access to them. There are 4 10 mil bolts that hold this on, or nuts. And once you get that off, you'll have access to the 2 bolts on the lower control arm that you're going to have to remove next. Now these are the 2 bolts we're going to be removing here on the lower control arm. This one is for the shock, the bottom of the shock mount, and this one's going to the lower control arm to the knuckle here. This is an E20 external torque bit bolt, so you'll need an 20 mil and E20 star. It looks like a star kind of there. You'll need a 20 mil for this side, and you'll need a 21 mil for the nut on the back. This one's going to be 18 front and rear, no special stuff, just normal sockets. And I have a transmission stand here just to support this a little bit so it doesn't fall too far. Now before you bend this lower control arm down too far, this is only on the driver's side. There is this headlight leveler, and there's a little tab. The easiest way to disconnect it so you don't break it is this little tab right here on this elbow. You're gonna push this and gently wiggle it out. There we go. And now you're free to bend the lower control arm down enough to get the spring out. You can bend this down a little bit and take the old spring out. There's a spring perch on the top here, and then there's one that usually sticks in the bottom. There's the old one. So we'll take this out because we want to make sure that we're aligning the new spring up. So there's the old spring, and this is our new one. We're gonna remove these little mounts from the stock ones, and we're gonna be putting the end of the spring right here on this little notch. Do look at this little tab, because this is gonna be a reference point when we put the new springs in. We'll do the same thing with the one on the top. Make sure that the end of the spring goes right there on this mount. We're gonna slide this in the new car now. Now doing this with one person is a little difficult because you have to hold this down while you put the spring in. But do mind that this little tab needs to be located. There's a hole on the bottom of the lower control arm. It's located towards the wheel. So make sure that that's aligned properly, and then just get this little part up in the hole at the top. Now we can take out the shock so we can replace the bump stop, because we have a much shorter one, just like we installed in the front. First, we're going to want to remove these lines from the rear shock, and then there's one electrical connection right here we'll need to remove. So the only thing holding on the shock now are the 3 bolts on the top, and these are 12 mils, but they're the external Torx fitting again, so you might as well buy a whole set of these sockets if you're going to do this install. So we'll remove these 3 bolts, we can take out the shock, swap bump stocks, pretty easy. Now to swap out the bump stops to the shorter ones, we have to remove the nut on here that's on the top hat. To grab the damper, just slide the old bump stop down and give it a hold, and we're going to be using a 16 mil on the impact for this. There we go. You can slide this out. We're not going to be using the dust boot on this one. They've included one, and to put this on, you'll slide the bump stops through here, and you'll need to finesse it to the top. The easiest way I've found to put these bolts back on the lower control arm is by using one of these stands again. Just gonna make lining up those holes easy, and you don't have to strain your muscles or hold this up in the same spot. These bolts go in from rear to front. Now we can keep raising it and get the lower control arm aligned with the knuckle. Now the 3 bolts that hold on the upper shock mount, those need to be torqued down to 21 foot-pounds. Now this bolt, the 18 mil that holds on the bottom of the shock, that needs to be torqued down to 74 foot-pounds. And then the 20 mil external Torx bit bolt that holds on the lower control arm to the knuckle, that needs to be torqued down to 122 foot-pounds. So now that we got everything torqued down, we can go ahead and put the wheels back on, lower this thing down, and see how it looks. All right, so this looks quite a bit lower. Let's get a measurement from the center of the wheel. It's about 13.75 of an inch in the front. And over on the rear, we're at 14.25. So this looks great, way better than stock, obviously. We've got a consistent 1 1/8 inch drop, both in the front and the rear, which equates to about 1 finger of wheel gap in the front and 2 finger wheel gap in the rear. Now we might see a little drop in ride height after the springs have settled after we put some miles on it, but 1 1/8 is about as much as we're gonna get initially right off the bat. Now if you guys have any questions, feel free to send us an email at sales@ftspeed.com or just go to the contact page and send us an email. That's all I got for you guys. Our Supra is now lowered, and I'll see you guys in the next video.